In a remote mountain area while a blizzard is raging, a black woman sits in despair beside a pile of unpaid bills, helpless because her small diner, the last thing her late husband left behind, is about to be seized by the bank. Suddenly, the roar of engines breaks through the storm. Outside stand 11 big, brutal bikers, and the old woman freezes in fear. But when she realizes a few of them are injured, she doesn't hesitate. She brings them inside, wraps their wounds, and shares her last meal with them. What she doesn't expect is this, that one act will bring hundreds of motorcycles to her door. Before we finish, tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow I have something special for you. The cold wind of the Tennessee mountains whistled through the rotten wooden window cracks, but the chill creeping into Gloria Thompson's heart was far more bone-aching. She stood alone in the silent Mountain Soul diner. She thought of Robert, her late husband. 3 years ago, as he took his last breath on the hospital bed, Robert had gripped her hand, whispering a final wish. "Gloria, this diner is everything to me. Don't sell it. Keep its light on for the lost souls, my dear." From that moment, the diner was no longer just a house. It became a sacred promise. However, business was declining, customers were few, and the debt kept mounting. She had sold her wedding ring, drained all her savings, and worked 18 hours a day. Even so, the thought of giving up never once crossed her mind, until that fragile piece was suddenly shattered. A shiny black BMW crunched onto the gravel of the Mountain Soul diner with a screeching brake sound. Dust covered the old trucks of poor workers nearby. 2 men stepped out. They wore smooth gray suits and polished leather shoes. They walked into the diner with looks of contempt like they were walking into a junkyard. Gloria Thompson was wiping the counter. Her calloused hands moved slowly over the wood. The doorbell rang. "Good morning, sit anywhere you like," she said without looking up. "Coffee is coming right up." But these footsteps were different. Not the boots of workers. It was the sound of expensive leather shoes hitting the floor. Gloria looked up. Her hand stopped midair. She felt a cold rock weigh down her stomach. Richard Caldwell did not look at her. His eyes swept over the flickering neon sign. Then they stopped at a grease stain on her old apron. He didn't introduce himself. He just jerked his chin. His assistant Derek understood. He pulled a thick file from a crocodile skin briefcase and threw it onto the counter with a thud. "Mrs. Gloria Thompson?" Richard asked. He didn't look at her face. He looked at the grease stain on her apron. Gloria let go of the cloth. She hid her hands under the counter because they started to tremble. "Yes, that is me. How can I help you, gentlemen?" Richard sighed, a long, dramatic sound as he looked around the room. He took in the flickering neon sign, the cracked leather seats, and the old photos of Robert on the wall. "First Tennessee Bank sent us. I am Richard Caldwell, head of debt collection at the bank. This," he jerked his chin backward, "is my associate, Mr. Derek." "The bank," Gloria's voice dropped low. "I was told I had until the end of the month to speak with the manager." "The manager has been replaced by a computer algorithm, Mrs. Thompson," Richard said. His voice was cold as money. "And the algorithm says you owe $18,000 in mortgage payments. You are 4 months late. In our world, that is not a conversation. That is a default." He flipped open the file and pointed to a row of numbers. "Under the terms of your loan, we are exercising our right to early collection. You have 7 days to pay the full amount, $18,000, plus interest late fees and legal costs. If the money is not in our account by next Friday," he leaned closer. His gray eyes held no human warmth, "we will begin foreclosure proceedings. This Mountain Soul diner will be padlocked." Gloria felt the room spin. Her knees went weak. She had to hold tight to the edge of the counter to keep from falling. "7 days, sir. Please, you have to understand. My husband died 3 years ago. Hospital bills, the funeral. I put every penny I had to keep this place open. It is slow this season. But the regulars, they are coming back. I just need a little more time." Derek, the assistant, let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a cruel sound echoing in the empty diner. "More time, Mrs. Thompson. Time is money. And looking at this place, I see you are out of both." Richard glanced at Derek, but he didn't correct him. Instead, he looked back at Gloria with cold contempt. "Mrs. Thompson, I meet people like you every day. People who think hard work and a good heart are enough to run a business. They are not. You opened a business without a backup plan. You manage finances based on emotion instead of strategy. In the real world, if you cannot protect your assets, you do not deserve to keep them. Those words hit Gloria's chest like a physical punch. She stood there, a woman who worked 18 hours a day for 18 years. She had stayed open through blizzards to serve stranded travelers. She had cared for her husband through his painful final days without missing a shift. And now, a man who never had a callus on his hand was saying she was incapable. 7 days, Richard repeated, buttoning his suit jacket as he prepared to leave. Not a day more. The law is very clear on this. He turned to the door. His polished shoes clicked on the floor. Derek followed. He stopped long enough to smirk at the photo of Robert in his uniform. Richard buttoned his jacket again, ready to walk out. But at the door, he stopped. He turned his head to look at her one last time with fake pity. A piece of advice, Mrs. Thompson. You should start looking for another job now. I heard the Walmart in the next county is hiring greeters. They even provide aprons. Maybe that job suits your abilities better. Derek's laughter trailed behind them as the heavy door slammed shut. The BMW engine roared, a low, powerful growl that seemed to mock the silence of the diner. Gloria stood frozen behind the counter. She didn't cry. She had spent the last 3 years crying until her eyes were dry. She just stared at the dust settling in the window. She watched the black car disappear down the road, taking her last bit of hope with it. Slowly, she reached under the counter and pulled out a small metal cash box. She opened it. Inside were a few crumpled bills and some change. $53. Where would she find $18,000 in 7 days? The room fell silent, but in Gloria's mind, Derek's mocking laughter still echoed like metal scraping against glass. She leaned back against the counter, sliding down to the cold floor. Gloria closed her eyes, trying to find Robert's figure in the darkness. "Where are you, Rob?" she whispered into the void. "I need you to tell me everything will be all right. I need you to lie to me." Memories flooded back. She remembered the night Robert died. The hospital reeked of disinfectant and the monotonous beeping of machines. He had held her hand, his large, warm hand, now just skin and bones. "Gloria," he had said, his breath heavy, "don't sell the diner, not for the money, but because it's where lost souls find each other. If you sell it, where will they go?" That promise had haunted her for the past 3 years. It was the motivation that made her wake up at 4 in the morning every day. To need dough, the reason she refused to turn on the heater in her bedroom to save on gas for the diner. She ate leftover bread, mended old clothes, even sold her mother's engagement ring. She did it all. And now all those sacrifices were summed up in one word: failure. She stood up, her legs trembling as she walked toward the window. The snowstorm was intensifying. The wind whistled through the old window cracks. Gloria looked out at the empty street. No one was coming. There wouldn't be any customers in this weather. Today's revenue was a big fat zero. She went to the old gramophone in the corner of the room, the only thing in the diner that never broke down. She dropped a coin in. The soul music of Otis Redding played, crackling and melancholic. "I've been loving you too long to stop now." That amount was barely enough to cover the extended cash register, a small sum of money, not to mention the $18,000 the bank was demanding over the next 7 days. Gloria trembled as she caressed the old photograph hanging on the wall. In it, her husband Robert was smiling broadly, his arm around her shoulder, on the opening day of the restaurant 2 decades ago. "I'm sorry, Robert," Gloria whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't hold on anymore." She took a deep breath, accepting defeat. Her calloused hand reached for the light switch. Just one click, and the Mountain Soul Diner would sink into eternal sleep, burying both its glorious past and its hopeless present. Her finger just touched the cold plastic of the switch. Vroom! The roar of engines tore through the silent night. It was so intense it shook the floor beneath her feet. Gloria jumped, her heart pounding. She rushed to the window. Through the white curtain of snow, dozens of blinding headlights were piercing the storm, rushing straight toward the diner like a pack of steel beasts. A convoy of large displacement motorcycles, huge men dressed in black leather. Primal fear struck. Gloria hurriedly grabbed the latch, intending to lock it tight. News reports about brutal gangs robbing this mountain region flashed in her mind. No, she couldn't let them in. But her hand stopped in midair. Through the frosted glass, she saw a scene that made her blood run cold. A giant man in the lead was helping a fallen bike onto the snow, and under the sweeping headlights, a long crimson streak dragged across the white ground. That wasn't engine oil. That was blood. The heavy door was pushed open, bringing with it a bone-chilling gust of cold air and the strong smell of fresh blood. A giant walked in. He was nearly 7 feet tall, looming like a black mountain. His head was shaved, a speckled gray beard covering a fierce face with a long scar running down his temple. On arms as thick as a normal person's legs were fierce eagle tattoos, and his leather vest bore the Iron Brotherhood logo. Gloria took a step back, her breath catching. But the giant Marcus, leader of the group, didn't look at her with predator's eyes. His eyes were red from the wind and snow, but deep inside was sheer panic. He was supporting a young man whose skin had turned ashen gray, his arm wrapped temporarily in a flannel shirt, now frozen stiff with blood and snow. "I apologize for barging in like this, ma'am," Marcus said. His voice was a deep rumble, hoarse from the cold, but his tone was surprisingly polite. "We have an injured man. A black bear attacked us about 10 miles back when we stopped for a break. We rode through this mess looking for a hospital, but visibility is absolutely zero." He looked around the diner, his eyes desperate. Do you have any medical supplies? Bandages, antiseptic, anything? We will pay and leave immediately. We don't want any trouble." Behind him, 9 other members stood frozen under the snow. Men and women covered in tattoos, shoulders heavy with ice, their eyes looking inside with the pleading look of souls standing on the edge of the abyss. Gloria looked at Tommy's pale blue lips. Then she looked into Marcus's eyes. Not the eyes of a predator. Those were the eyes of someone afraid of losing a comrade. She let go of the door latch. "Put him here," Gloria said, her voice becoming sharp and authoritative. She pointed to a large table near the fireplace. "Lay him flat on the table. Hurry." The bikers didn't hesitate. They moved with military precision, clearing the table surface, while Marcus gently lowered Tommy down. Gloria rushed into the back storage room. She grabbed the metal first aid box. She returned with gauze, antiseptic cotton balls, and a suture kit. "Hold him down," Gloria ordered as she approached Tommy. Marcus peeled away the blood-soaked flannel. Gloria's stomach churned, but her hands remained steady. 4 deep, jagged claw marks ran from his shoulder down to his forearm, the unmistakable brutal mark of bear claws. She had spent years caring for Robert through the pain of his final days. She was no stranger to the sight of suffering. She began to work. Her mahogany hands moved with a calmness she didn't know she still possessed. She cleaned the wound, the pungent smell of antiseptic filling the air, and began to bandage it. Tommy moaned, his body tensing, but Marcus held his shoulders firmly, whispering words of encouragement. 20 minutes passed in a tense, heavy silence. The only sounds were the wind howling outside and occasional hisses of pain from the table. When Gloria finally stepped back, the wounds were cleaned and tightly bandaged. Tommy's eyes fluttered open. His face was still pale, but there was life in his gaze now. Where am I?" he croaked. Marcus leaned over him. "You're safe, brother. We found shelter. This lady here saved your life." Tommy turned his head slowly to look at Gloria. His eyes were glassy with pain, but something like wonder crossed his face. You helped me. You don't even know me." Gloria finished tying the last bandage. "I know you're hurt. That's all I need to know." Tommy tried to sit up, but Marcus gently pushed him back down. "Easy, kid. You lost a lot of blood." "The bear," Tommy said, his voice shaking. "It came out of nowhere. I thought I was done for." Sarah moved closer, placing a hand on his forehead to check for fever. "You scared us half to death, Tommy. When you fell off that bike, I thought my heart was going to stop." Tommy looked around at his brothers and sisters, 11 faces looking back at him with worry and relief. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have been more careful. I ruined the trip." "Hey," Marcus's voice was firm but gentle. "You didn't ruin anything. We're a family. When one of us goes down, we all stop. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." Danny stepped forward, his young face serious. "We're not leaving you behind, Tommy. Not ever. You understand?" Tommy's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, unable to speak. Gloria watched this exchange in silence. She saw something she hadn't expected. These rough-looking bikers weren't just an organization. They were a unit, a family forged in fire, bound by something stronger than blood. "Rest now," Gloria said softly. "The storm will pass. Everything will be clearer in the morning." Tommy closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to relax. For the first time in hours, his breathing was steady. "He needs a real doctor," Gloria said, looking up at Marcus. "Those scratches are very deep." "He needs stitches and a rabies shot. He has lost a lot of blood." Marcus nodded, his jaw clenched. "We know. We tried to make it to Knoxville." He looked out the window, where the world had disappeared behind a white wall. Snow was now piling up against the glass. But the bikes, they can't get through 3 feet of snow. As if on cue, the radio on the counter crackled to life. The announcer's voice was urgent. Code red blizzard warning for the Great Smoky Mountains area. Visibility is near zero. Route 441 is closed in both directions. Residents are required to stay indoors. Do not go out under any circumstances. A heavy silence covered the diner. Marcus looked at his team, a total of 11 people, including himself. Marcus looked at his 10 brothers. Giants who usually feared nothing in heaven or earth now stood shivering teeth, chattering lips purple. Snow on their leather jackets began to melt, dripping onto the floor, drop by drop. They looked at Tommy, who had finally drifted into a shallow, painful sleep. Marcus looked at Gloria, his face full of deep guilt. We will figure out a way to leave," Marcus said, though his voice lacked certainty. "We don't want to be a burden on you, ma'am. You are here alone. We will take him to the garage or somewhere so we don't disturb you." Gloria looked at the group. Then she glanced at the tin box under the counter, which now contained very little money. A few pieces of dry bread, a leftover block of butter, and a lonely can of beans in the kitchen corner. That was all left of the assets she had. She thought about the banker Richard Caldwell, the man who said she was incapable, and her diner was a shabby shack. Then she felt Robert's presence in the room. She remembered his voice. "This place is a lighthouse, Gloria. Never let its light go out." A strange current of strength flowed through her calloused hands. Gloria stood up straight. Her shoulders no longer slumped under the weight of debt. She stepped out from behind the counter, her steps no longer heavy, but decisive. "You aren't going anywhere," Gloria said, her voice steady and unshakable. She went behind the counter and turned the knob on the coffee machine. "No one can survive a code red 4 storm out there on a motorcycle. You stay right here. I will make hot coffee and find whatever is left to eat." Marcus stared at her, his eyes wide with surprise. He looked at his scarred hands, then looked back at the small woman standing tall and proud before the world. "Ma'am, you don't even know us. We are just strangers, and we look like—" "And you are in distress," Gloria cut him off. "In this diner, that is the only thing that matters. Robert always said a lighthouse doesn't ask who is on the boat, it simply shines." The tension on Marcus's shoulders finally melted away. He looked at his team, then back at Gloria, and for the first time a look of deep gratitude replaced the fear in his eyes. He realized that right in the middle of the worst storm of the decade, they hadn't just found a building, they had found a soul. In the cramped kitchen, Gloria held the last box of butter in her hands. It was weightless. She looked at it as if it were a treasure. This was her breakfast for tomorrow, and the day after. She peered through the crack in the kitchen door. 11 hungry people outside. Strangers who could kill her in an instant. Why should she feed them? Why should she drain what little she had left for these people? A bitter voice echoed in her head. "Keep it, Gloria. You need energy to pack. You need to survive." But then she saw Danny, the youngest. He was trembling not just from the cold, but from hypoglycemia. He stared at the kitchen door with the eyes of a starving dog, eyes that dared not hope, but still pleaded in vain. That gaze tore through Gloria's defenses. She sighed a sigh that released her selfishness. She took out 5 loaves of sourdough bread. The knife sliced through the crisp crust. Swish, swish. Each cut felt like a piece of her gut. She cracked the eggs. The shells crumbled. If she sold this food, she could earn another $20. $20 could buy a bus ticket to another city when the bank foreclosed on the house. But she still turned on the stove. The smell of melting butter on the hot pan rose fragrant and alluring. It was the smell of life, the smell of family, the smell of peaceful Sunday mornings that she had lost forever. As she scooped the last spoonful of beans onto a plate, she realized she was crying, not because of the waste, but because she realized this was the last time she would cook in this kitchen as its owner. This was Mountain Soul Diner's last supper. She wiped away her tears, adjusted her hair. She wouldn't let them see her cry. She carried the tray of food. It was heavy. As she stepped out, the aroma of toasted bread and hot coffee miraculously dispelled the stench of blood and fear. Sarah Mitchell, the woman the group called Mama Bear, was the first to speak. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her voice warm and comforting. "This smell. It's exactly like the coffee my mother used to make every Sunday morning when I was a kid in Georgia." Jake Williams, a tall, thin white man with shoulder-length gray hair, quietly bowed his head. He used to be a powerful CFO before leaving it all to find his soul on the road. Jake mumbled a short prayer, his hands trembling from the cold as he gripped the porcelain cup before picking up a piece of bread. The other members waited quietly too. No one fought, no one rushed. They saved the hottest, best portions for Tommy, who lay injured. The last person to take a piece of bread was Danny Ortega. This young Latino man was only 28, looking much thinner and smaller than the leather jacket he wore. His brown eyes clearly showed worry and hunger as he looked at the small piece of bread in his hand. He looked at it as if it were a precious block of gold. "Thank you, ma'am," Danny said, his voice shaking with emotion. I really haven't eaten anything all day." Gloria looked at Danny, and her heart tightened again. This boy reminded her of the orphans she and Robert used to welcome into the diner, feeding them free meals without asking why. She placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the cold leather jacket. "Eat," she said gently. "Don't be shy. You are safe here." Marcus Johnson sat at the corner of the counter, silently observing everything. He watched the small black woman moving constantly around the diner. She didn't just bring food, she brought care. She checked Tommy's wounds, adjusted blankets for those shivering from the wind, and poured more coffee for anyone who had just finished. Marcus realized something that the banker, Richard Caldwell, had been completely blind to. This diner might be poor, materially cracked leather seats, peeling linoleum floors, and neon lights flickering like they were about to die. But this place was cared for with a whole soul. The tablecloths, though old and frayed, were washed clean and folded with extreme care. "Do you run this place alone?" Marcus asked when Gloria stopped in front of him to refill his coffee cup. Gloria nodded, a flash of sadness crossing her eyes, but she quickly hid it. "My husband Robert passed away 3 years ago. Before that, we always did everything together." "I am sorry for your loss." Gloria smiled, her first real smile after many dark days. "He was the best man I ever knew." Outside, the blizzard continued to scream furiously, wind pounding against the diner walls as if wanting to flatten everything. But inside this small space, warmth from the hot coffee pots and from melting hearts created a completely different world. 11 strangers and a widow sat together, sharing the last pieces of bread like a real family. Gloria looked around her diner. She thought of the $18,000, the 7-day deadline. But when she saw the rare smile on Tommy's pale face and the peace in Danny's eyes, she realized the best meal isn't the most expensive one, but the meal shared with a whole heart during the hardest times. She no longer felt helpless. On this stormy night, she was still the keeper of the lighthouse. And as long as this light was on, she hadn't failed. As midnight approached, the atmosphere inside the Mountain Soul diner changed. The fireplace hummed steadily, and Tommy Rivera was more stable, his breathing now, even and deep, as he rested in the breakfast booth. Most members of the Iron Brotherhood sat scattered around the diner. Some dozed on tables, while others chatted in low, respectful tones. The smell of coffee, though fading, still brought a sense of reassurance against the cold darkness outside. Gloria Thompson stood behind the counter, her hands moving mechanically as she wiped surfaces for the 10th time. Her mahogany skin looked blurred and tired under the fluorescent lights, but her mind was elsewhere. Marcus left his seat, walking heavily, as if dragging a painful past on his shoulders. He sat on the stool opposite Gloria, his large, rough hands clasped tight on the cold counter. "I know what you are thinking, ma'am." Marcus's voice rang out, no longer the thunderclap from when he first entered, but deep and cracked like rocks rolling down a cliff. He didn't look at Gloria, but stared at his distorted reflection in the black coffee. "You see leather jackets, you see chains, you see these scars, and you think we are a bunch of thugs looking for trouble, right?" Gloria stopped wiping the cup. She intended to deny it out of politeness, but the bloodshot eyes, full of exhaustion of the man before her, choked the social niceties in her throat. She remained silent, serving as admission. Marcus smiled faintly, a bitter, twisted smile on his fierce face. "The Iron Brotherhood is not a gang. We are a platoon." He looked up, his gaze boring deep into Gloria, burning with an unnameable pain. "Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. We left a part of our souls there. When we came back, this country looked at us like strangers. We were invisible, right in the home we bled to protect. So we found each other. We lean on each other so the explosions in our heads don't tear apart our last bit of sanity." Gloria froze. She glanced at the 10 men huddled, drifting in corners of the diner. Now the ferocious shell had vanished. She no longer saw thugs. She only saw big, wounded children trying to warm each other in the cold winter of life. "So, where were you going?" Gloria asked softly, her voice trembling with regret. "Why rush into the heart of the storm like this?" Marcus took a deep breath, his tattooed hand pointing toward the pile of black duffel bags stacked in the dark corner of the diner. Knoxville, St. Jude's Orphanage. Gloria followed his hand, her heart pounding. She had thought those ominous black bags surely contained guns, drugs, or contraband. What's inside? Teddy bears, dolls, and some Lego sets. Marcus's answer was light as a feather, but hit Gloria's mind like a sledgehammer. Her mouth fell open, unable to believe her ears. "Tomorrow night is Christmas." Marcus's voice became strangely warm. "The kids there, they have nothing. If we don't come when they wake up tomorrow morning, the only thing welcoming them will be silence and cold walls. We want them to know this cruel world hasn't forgotten them yet." A bitter lump rose in Gloria's throat. Her tears welled up hot. You risked your lives, rode through a code red 4 blizzard, just to deliver toys." Marcus nodded. He turned to look at Danny, the youngest, sleeping slumped on the table with a rare, peaceful face. "Because we understand that cold, ma'am. We understand how painful it is to be abandoned. Look at Danny 2 years ago. We picked him out of a dumpster. Now he is the youngest brother. He is our family." Gloria looked at the sleeping young man, then at the giants around him. She covered her mouth to suppress a sob. Those black leather jackets weren't to scare people. They were the last armor protecting hearts that had too many scratches but still beat strongly for humanity. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the sound of a chair scraping on the floor. Jake Williams, the tall man with gray hair, had stood up from his table near the door. He wasn't looking at the storm. He was staring at the wall behind the cash register. He was looking at the photo of Robert and Gloria. "My God," Jake whispered, his voice trembling with a sudden raw emotion. "I know this man." Gloria turned, her heart skipping a beat. You knew Robert." Jake walked closer to the counter, his eyes glued to Robert's warm, open smile in the photo. His eyes began to glisten with tears threatening to spill. 15 years ago, Jake began, slowly, his voice heavy with the weight of the past. "I was a man who had lost everything. My wife left me, my company fired me because I was an alcoholic and I had nowhere to go. I drove through these mountains in the middle of the night, not knowing where I was heading. Honestly, I didn't care if I got anywhere or not." He paused, choking up as he looked at Robert's image. "My car ran out of gas. I sat there in the dark thinking about ending it all. Then a truck pulled over. A black man jumped out. He didn't just give me gas. He sat with me for 2 hours, just sat and listened to me talk." Jake's hands trembled as he held the coffee cup. The memories were flooding back, vivid and raw. "That night," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "I had a gun in my glove compartment, a Colt .45, loaded. I was going to use it." The room went completely silent. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. "I had written a note, left it on my kitchen table back in Nashville, told my ex-wife I was sorry, told my kids I loved them, but I was too broken to be their father anymore." Gloria's breath caught in her throat. "I sat in that dark car," Jake said, "and I talked myself through it, step by step, like a business plan. That's what my whole life had been. You know, business plans, strategies, profit margins. I turned everything into numbers, even my own death." He paused, staring into his coffee as if he could see the past reflected in its dark surface. "Then those headlights appeared. I thought it was a cop at first. I almost did it right then and there before they could stop me. But it wasn't a cop. No." Jake shook his head slowly. "It was a beat-up old pickup truck, and out stepped this big black man with the warmest smile I'd ever seen." Jake laughed softly, a painful sound. "I told him no. Told him to mind his own business. I was rude, aggressive. I wanted him to leave so I could finish what I started. But Robert didn't leave. No, he didn't. He just leaned against my car and started talking. About the weather, about the mountains, about a diner he and his wife were building. He talked like we were old friends catching up." Jake looked up at Gloria, his eyes glistening. "After about an hour, I started talking too. I told him everything. The drinking, the divorce, the bankruptcy, the shame. I told him things I'd never told anyone. And he just listened. No judgment, no advice, no Bible verses. He just listened like my story mattered, like I mattered." Jake set down his coffee cup. When I finally stopped talking, the sun was starting to come up. Robert looked at me and said, "Sounds like you've been carrying a heavy load, friend. How about you let me help you lighten it?" He drove me to a diner in Knoxville, bought me the biggest breakfast I'd ever seen. Then he gave me that $50 and the address of a rehab center. Jake's voice broke. That was 15 years ago. I've been sober ever since. I have a relationship with my kids now. I have a purpose. I have a life. He looked at the photo of Robert on the wall. All because a stranger stopped on a dark road and refused to let me die alone. Gloria felt tears rising in the corners of her eyes. That was Robert. That was exactly the kind of person he was. He told me one thing, Jake continued. There is always a morning after every long night, friend. You just have to wait long enough to see it. Then he gave me the address of a rehab center and $50. I'm pretty sure that was every last penny in his wallet at the time. Marcus stood up and walked over to look at the photo. Then Sarah joined them. Then Carlos Mendez and 2 others. They gathered around the small framed memory of Robert Thompson, and a strange, powerful energy filled the diner. I met him too, Sarah whispered, hand over her heart. 10 years ago, my car broke down right outside this pass. I had 3 small kids in the back, and they were crying from hunger. Every other car sped past us. They saw a woman on the side of the road, and they looked away. But he stopped. He didn't just fix my fan belt. He brought us into this very diner, bought the kids a full meal, and refused to take a single penny from me. I know that face. Carlos Mendez added, his voice full of quiet reverence. 7 years ago, I was in a bad way. I got fired, my wife left, and I was sleeping in my car in a parking lot not far from here. One morning, a tall black man knocked on my window. He woke me up, brought me in here for a free breakfast, and told me, "Son, today is a new day. Don't let yesterday decide what today will be." The stories began to pour out. Not all 11 of them had met Robert, but 4 of them had been touched by his soul during their darkest hours. And the common thread in every story was the same. Robert stopped when everyone else ignored them. He saw them when the rest of the world treated them as if they were invisible. Gloria stood there, tears streaming down her cheeks, her chest heaving with a mix of grief and beautiful, overwhelming pride. In the 3 years since Robert died, she hadn't known about these stories. She never knew how many lives her husband had touched on his long drives and late nights in the mountains. Marcus stepped closer to her, his voice gentle and respectful. "Mrs. Thompson, your husband saved these people when no one else bothered to look at them. Truck drivers, wanderers, people on the edge, most people just look right through us. But Robert, he looked at us. He saw us." Gloria realized something profound in that moment. The people standing before her people with tattoos, leather jackets, and rough exteriors were exactly the people Robert had lived to serve. They were people judged by their appearance. They were looked at with fear, contempt, and suspicion, just like Robert had once been looked at because of his skin color. Just like she had been looked at by Richard Caldwell earlier this morning. "You know," Gloria said, her voice choked with emotion, "when you first arrived, I was terrified. My first thought was to lock the door and hide." Marcus nodded understandingly. "We are used to that, ma'am. We know the impression we make." "But Robert wouldn't have locked that door," Gloria said, looking around the diverse group currently her guests. "Robert never judged a book by its cover, and I almost forgot that." Sarah walked around the counter and hugged Gloria tight. It was a warm, strong hug between 2 women who had lost much but still had too much to give. "You didn't forget," Sarah whispered in her ear. "You opened the door for us. That is all that matters. You are exactly like him, Gloria. You are exactly like him." The storm outside continued to scream, but the fear that had suffocated Gloria all day long had vanished, and looking at the people her husband had once helped, she knew that the Mountain Soul Diner wasn't just a building. It was a promise. The night grew deeper, but no one in the Mountain Soul Diner could sleep. The stories about Robert had breathed new life into the old space. For the Iron Brotherhood, gratitude wasn't just words. It turned into a powerful urge to give back. Marcus Johnson stood up. His broad shoulders shook slightly as he looked around the diner with different eyes. He started noticing things his exhaustion had hidden before the dripping faucet in the sink, the freezer door hanging off its hinges, letting cold air escape, and a few burnt-out bulbs in the corner. He looked at the peeling floor and realized the loneliness of the woman who had fought to keep this place alive. "Brothers," Marcus said. His voice was low but commanding. Everyone looked up. We can do something for this place." Carlos Mendez, a professional mechanic in his regular life, immediately stood up and opened the toolkit he always carried on his bike. "That faucet," Carlos said, checking the rust. "I'll have it fixed in 10 minutes. Jake Williams stood up too, taking off his heavy leather jacket and rolling up his shirt sleeves. "I'll take the kitchen. It needs a real deep clean." Danny Ortega, though still thin and tired, quickly volunteered to straighten up the tables and chairs. Sarah walked into the kitchen and stood next to Gloria. "Let me help you with the dishes. Many hands make light work." Gloria stood there, her mahogany hands hanging limp. She didn't know what to say. She had been used to doing everything alone for the past 3 years. Since Robert died, she was the only one cleaning, fixing small breakages, carrying heavy boxes, and cooking for travelers. She had completely forgotten what it felt like to have help. "You don't have to do this," Gloria said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You must be very tired too." Marcus stopped and looked straight into her eyes with absolute respect. "Mrs. Thompson, your husband helped our brothers when they had nothing to give in return. Now it is our turn. This isn't work. This is paying a debt of honor." 2 hours later, the diner was completely transformed. Carlos fixed the faucet and the freezer hinges. Jake cleaned the kitchen. Danny rearranged the tables. Marcus replaced the burnt-out bulbs. In the kitchen, Sarah and Gloria worked in rhythm like two old friends. They chatted as they worked, confidences flowing naturally. "Have you lived here alone all this time?" Sarah asked, her hand still briskly wiping the porcelain plates. Gloria nodded, a flash of sadness crossing her face. "Since Robert died. Before that, we always had each other. But now, everything feels so empty." "I understand," Sarah said gently, her eyes full of empathy. "My husband died 5 years ago from cancer. The first 3 years after that, I was completely lost. I didn't know what to do with myself until I found the Iron Brotherhood." Gloria stopped working, looking at the woman opposite her with curiosity. "Why would a woman like you join a group that looks so scary?" Sarah smiled a gentle smile. "You know, most people just see the leather jackets and tattoos and think we are thugs. But really, the Iron Brotherhood is a roof for people with no family. Soldiers returning from war who can't fit in, lonely widows, grown-up orphans. All the people society pushed to the margins. We found each other on the road, and we take care of each other in a way the world won't." Gloria looked out at the dining room. She saw rough-looking men and women scrubbing, fixing, and cleaning every corner. No one ordered them. No one complained about being tired. They worked with pure willingness. "You really are." Gloria searched for the right words. "Nothing like I imagined." Sarah chuckled softly. "No one is ever like people imagine, honey. That is the biggest lesson life has taught me. The warmest hearts often hide behind the toughest shells." By nearly 4 in the morning, the Mountain Soul Diner looked completely different. Everything was clean and organized. Broken details were fully repaired. Marcus even found some leftover paint in the storage room and repainted the front door that had been peeling for a long time. Under the light of the new bulbs, the diner looked bright and full of life. Gloria sat down on a chair. She felt physically exhausted, but her heart was strangely warm. For the first time in many long months, the diner looked like someone truly cared for it, just like Robert used to do when he was alive. "Thank you, everyone," she said, her voice choking with unshed tears. "I really don't know what to say to express this gratitude." Marcus sat down opposite her, his large hands resting on the clean table. "Don't say anything, Mrs. Thompson. Just remember that on this stormy night, and in the future too, you are not alone." Dawn came to the Great Smoky Mountains slowly and quietly. The first pale yellow rays began to pierce through the dissipating storm clouds, dyeing the white snow, covering everything in honey color. The wind stopped screaming, leaving only gentle whispers through the old pines. Through the sparkling, clean diner window, Gloria saw the winding mountain road begin to appear. The old radio in the kitchen corner crackled, but the announcer's voice now brought good news. "Emergency announcement Route 441 is officially reopened to all vehicles. Rescue teams have cleared the final sections. However, the road surface is still slippery. Drivers are requested to travel at low speeds and exercise extreme caution." That news brought a mixed atmosphere of joy and sadness to the diner. Marcus stood up from his stool, stretching his broad shoulders and looking at the road ahead. "The road is open," Marcus said, his voice low but containing relief. "We need to get Tommy to a hospital immediately, and if we are lucky, we can still make it to the orphanage in Knoxville before Christmas Eve begins." Gloria nodded, though an indescribable regret rose in her heart. In just one short stormy night inside this small old diner, she had found something she thought she had lost forever since Robert left the feeling of being cared for, being seen, and being part of something bigger than herself. But she understood reality was waiting. Tommy needed professional medical care, and the orphans in Knoxville were waiting for the gifts prepared with all the love of the Iron Brotherhood. The group members began packing quickly and orderly. They put their heavy leather jackets back on, checking the bikes buried under the snow outside. Tommy Rivera was much more alert after a night of rest. The wound on his arm had been bandaged extremely carefully by Gloria. Though his face was still pale, he could sit on the back of a bike with support from a teammate. Before stepping out the door, Marcus approached Gloria. He slowly pulled a worn leather wallet from his pocket. "Mrs. Thompson, please let me pay for everything," Marcus said, his voice sincere. "The coffee, the bread, and especially your dedicated care for my brother all night. You saved Tommy's life, and that is priceless." Gloria looked at the stack of bills in Marcus's hand. Then she gently shook her head, her calloused hands pushing his hand back lightly. "No, Marcus, you don't owe me anything." Marcus frowned, looking a bit confused. "But ma'am, we can't leave without paying for what you sacrificed. You used your last pieces of bread to feed us." "Marcus," Gloria said, her voice soft but firm, "you have already paid me. You told me stories about Robert, things I didn't know at all for the past 3 years. You reminded me why my husband loved and built this diner so much. Last night, you fixed, cleaned, and helped me turn this place into a real home." She paused for a beat, her brown eyes glistening with tears of emotion. "You gave me something $18,000 or any amount of money can't buy hope and belief in human kindness. In this storm, I am the one who received the most." Marcus looked at her silently for a few seconds. He understood that for a woman like Gloria, dignity and sentiment were far more important than paper bills. He slowly put the wallet back in his pocket and nodded respectfully. "We will be back," Marcus said firmly. It wasn't the usual polite remark from a passerby. It was a promise from a man who considered this place home. "I promise you we will be back." One by one, the Iron Brotherhood members came to say goodbye to Gloria. Sarah hugged her tight, the warmth from her leather jacket still carrying the scent of last night's coffee. Jake Williams shook her hand, his eyes full of peace as he said, "God bless you, Gloria. You are the angel of this road." Danny Ortega was the last to approach. He looked at Gloria with glistening eyes, seeming to have much to say, but choking on words. "Thank you, ma'am," Danny said, his voice trembling with emotion. "It's been a long time since a stranger treated me like a real human being, not some trash on the street." Gloria reached out and gently stroked the young man's thin cheek. "You are always welcome here, Danny. Remember, there is always a part of this place for you." The sound of motorcycle engines suddenly roared, shattering the morning silence of the mountains. 11 Harley-Davidsons started in unison, creating a symphony of power and authority. Marcus led the convoy, Tommy sitting steadily behind another brother, his white bandaged arm standing out against the black leather. Gloria stood on the porch, her shoulders hunched slightly against the morning chill, but her face was radiant. She watched as the convoy began rolling onto the cleared highway. Before disappearing around the sharp bend of the mountain, Marcus turned around, raising his arm high to wave goodbye one last time. Gloria waved back. She stood there until the roar of the engines faded completely into the cold air, leaving only the sound of forest birds hidden somewhere. She turned and walked back inside the diner. The room was empty now, but it looked completely different. It was clean and organized. The faucet wasn't dripping anymore. The lights were bright. The tables and chairs were perfectly aligned. But as the noise of the strangers faded away, the brutal reality began to take shape again. Gloria walked to the counter and opened the cash register drawer. $53 still lay there silently. The old crumpled bills seemed to remind her of the $18,000 the bank demanded. Gloria looked up at Robert's photo on the wall. His smile seemed to give her strength. She took a deep breath. She picked up her cleaning cloth and started preparing for a new day. She didn't know what the next 6 days would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. The Mountain Soul Lighthouse would still shine tonight. 6 days passed not like a fleeting breeze, but slowly and painfully like peeling away layers of skin. Each morning, Gloria woke up, and the first thing that struck her wasn't the sunlight, but the harsh reality. 5 days left. 4 days left. 3 days left. She paced the diner like a ghost. She touched every table, every chair. She remembered the scratch on table number 4 was from old Joe drunk 10 years ago. She remembered the burn mark on the counter was from Robert accidentally leaving his cigar behind. Each mark was a memory, and she was about to leave it all behind. On the 5th night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in the dimly lit diner, illuminated only by the pale light of the neon sign. She pulled out her ledger, adding up the numbers she knew by heart. Weekly revenue $420. Debt $18,000. She laughed. It was ridiculous. A lifetime, a legacy of love valued by these soulless numbers. She began writing a letter to Robert. My love, I'm sorry. I've cleaned everything up. I've packed my clothes. But I don't know how to pack our memories. How can I walk out that door and leave your breath behind? What will they turn this place into? A convenience store? A junkyard? I'd rather burn it down than let them trample on your dreams. She picked up the lighter, her fingers tracing the metal wheel. The insane thought of arson flashed through her mind. If she couldn't keep it, no one else had the right to. But then her eyes fell on the front door, which Marcus had carefully repainted. The glossy black paint strong and proud, his promise echoed in her ears. We'll be back. Gloria extinguished the fire within her. She put down the lighter. She couldn't destroy it. For now, it wasn't just Robert's legacy, it was Marcus's promise. She had to believe. Though that belief was as fragile as a thread hanging by 1,000 pounds, she had to believe until the very last moment. The next morning, Gloria woke up very early. She took time to make herself look her best. She put on a dark blue dress with a small floral pattern. It was the dress Robert liked most because he always said it made her look elegant. Gloria knew she was about to lose everything, but she promised herself she would leave with the dignity of someone who fought until the very last breath. She wiped the counter one last time. She brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat down to wait. At exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, the sound of an engine rang out from afar. Gloria stood behind the counter and took a deep breath. Her calloused hands gripped the hem of her dress to stop herself from shaking. She waited for the shiny black BMW and Richard Caldwell's cold words. But the sound getting closer was not the sound of a luxury car. It was the fierce, deep roar of dozens of big engines. The ground began to shake slightly. Gloria ran to the door and froze at the scene unfolding. It wasn't just the 11 bikes from the stormy night. At least 30 Harley-Davidsons were turning into the parking lot, and there were still more queuing up from the highway. Shiny chrome reflected the morning sunlight. They created a mighty formation surrounding the small diner. Leading the convoy was Marcus Johnson. He took off his helmet to reveal his scarred face, but his eyes beamed with an indescribable joy. He walked up to Gloria and smiled. I told you we would be back. Sorry for the delay, Mrs. Thompson. However, walking next to him was a man Gloria had never met. He was a black man, even taller than Marcus. He was about 60 years old, with hair and a beard as white as snow. He wore a thick leather jacket with a patch that read, National President, Iron Brotherhood. He carried an air of majesty and calm that made the engine noise seem to quiet down as he stepped off his bike. The older man approached Gloria. He didn't speak immediately. He just looked at her for a long time with eyes full of deep respect. Then, to Gloria's amazement, this powerful man slowly knelt on one knee on the gravel in front of her. He spoke in a warm, deep voice. Mrs. Gloria Thompson, I am Raymond Thunder Washington. I am the National President of the Iron Brotherhood. Gloria was completely stunned. She couldn't utter a word at the stranger's action. Raymond continued, his voice full of emotion. 35 years ago, I was just an 18-year-old black kid, homeless and completely desperate. I wandered into a small diner on this very mountain road on a freezing winter night. I was hungry and cold. I thought my life was over. But a young black couple, a man named Robert and his wife, took me in. They fed me a full meal and let me sleep in the warm. When I left the next morning, they gave me $100. Gloria covered her mouth with her hand and tears began to fall. 35 years ago was the very first year she and Robert opened the Mountain Soul Diner. Memories of those hard early days came flooding back vividly. Raymond looked straight into Gloria's eyes. The woman that year was you, and that man was your husband. I never forgot that life-saving grace, but life took me too far away. For years, I had no way to find you again. He turned to Marcus and the other members standing around. When Marcus told me about the blizzard, about the Mountain Soul Diner, and about a black woman named Gloria who opened her doors to save our brothers in distress, I knew immediately. I knew it was the same place that saved my life 35 years ago. Raymond pulled a thick, heavy cream envelope from his jacket pocket. He spoke solemnly. Inside is $25,000, $18,000 for you to pay off the bank completely, and the rest for you to renovate this diner. Through local stories, we knew your diner was about to be foreclosed. This is a donation from Iron Brotherhood members across America, from people who heard the story of the Highway Angel and wanted to contribute their small part. Gloria shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks as she looked at the envelope. She choked up. "I can't take it. This is too much money. I didn't do anything to deserve it." Raymond stepped closer and took her trembling hands. "You can, and you will, because this is not charity. This is a debt repayment. 35 years ago, you and your husband gave me a second chance to be a human being. Without that $100 and that hot soup, I don't know where I would be today. I might be in prison or dead long ago. Instead, I built a family and an organization that helps thousands of others. This is the fruit of the seed of kindness you planted." Raymond paused, his weathered face softening with memory. "You want to know what I was running from that night 35 years ago?" Gloria nodded, still unable to speak. "My father," Raymond said quietly. "He was a preacher, a hard man, believed that beating the devil out of his children was God's work." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing old scars beneath the tattoos. "These aren't all from the road. Some of these I got before I was 12 years old." Gloria's heart ached. "When I was 17, I finally fought back, broke his jaw, nearly killed him. Then I ran. I ran as far as my legs could carry me." Raymond looked at the snowy mountains through the window. "I spent a year on the streets, stealing, fighting, doing things I'm not proud of. By the time I stumbled into your diner, I was half dead, starving, frostbitten, ready to give up." He turned back to Gloria. "Your husband didn't just give me food and money. He gave me something I'd never had before. Respect. He looked at me like I was worth something, like I had potential. That $100, Raymond continued, I used it to get to Memphis. Got a job at a garage, started learning about motorcycles, worked my way up, saved every penny." He gestured to the bikers standing behind him. 20 years later, I founded the Iron Brotherhood, as a family for the broken, for the lost, for the people the world throws away." His voice grew thick with emotion. "Every person I've helped, every life we've saved, every kid we've pulled off the streets. It all started with your husband's kindness. One night, one meal, $100. Gloria finally found her voice. "Robert never told me about you. He never told me about any of these people." Raymond smiled, a warm, understanding smile. "That's because he never did it for recognition. He did it because it was right, because he saw people as people, not problems." He reached out and took Gloria's hands again. "You and your husband planted seeds you never got to see bloom, but I'm standing here telling you the forest is massive. There are people all over this country whose lives were touched by your kindness." He looked around at the gathered crowd, and today the forest came to protect the tree that started it all. He placed the envelope in Gloria's hand. Amidst the circle of Iron Brotherhood brothers, Tommy Rivera stepped aside to make room for a young woman standing right behind him. She was about 28 years old. She had a healthy Latina beauty with long black hair and intelligent bright eyes. She wore a professional camera around her neck and held a small notebook tight. Tommy stepped forward, his face glowing with a pride he couldn't hide. He introduced her to Gloria with an emotional voice. "Mrs. Thompson, this is my daughter Jessica. She is a reporter for the Knoxville News Sentinel." Jessica stepped forward and took Gloria's calloused hands. The young woman spoke with deep gratitude. "Mrs. Thompson, on behalf of my family, thank you for saving my dad. Without you and your dedication that night, he might have died in the cold on this road. I have heard Marcus and my father tell so many stories about you." She paused for a beat, her eyes glistening with admiration. "I want to tell this story for everyone to hear. I want the whole world to know what happened here, if you agree." Gloria hesitated for a moment. She looked down at the old wooden counter. All her life, she only knew how to work in silence. She was used to being a quiet shadow, helping others without needing anyone to know her name. She never thought of herself as an angel. She was simply doing what her heart desired. Marcus stood nearby. He placed his large hand on her shoulder reassuringly. He spoke in a warm, deep voice. "Mrs. Thompson, your story can inspire so many desperate people out there. The world needs to know that good people like you still exist." Gloria looked into the sincere eyes of the soldiers, and finally she nodded in agreement. Just a few days later, Jessica's article was published in the Knoxville News-Sentinel. The headline read, "The Lighthouse on the Mountain Road, the story of a small diner and changed lives." The article was not just about a simple rescue, it was a tribute to compassion. Jessica wrote about Gloria and Robert. She wrote about the 18 years they served lost travelers with all their hearts. She wrote about the small acts of kindness that saved many lives without them even knowing. The article detailed the Code Red 4 blizzard. It told of the arrival of the Iron Brotherhood. And it told of Raymond Washington and his 35-year journey to repay a debt of $100. The public reaction went far beyond Gloria's predictions. The article was shared thousands of times on social media in just a few hours. The story of the Highway Angel spread throughout Tennessee and then quickly across America. Local TV stations flocked to the small diner to interview Gloria. Then national networks joined in. And then the next miracle truly happened. The people Gloria and Robert had helped over the last 18 years started finding their way back. A woman named Elena flew 12 hours just to see Gloria. Elena walked into the diner with tears in her eyes. She hugged Gloria tight. She remembered years ago when she was a lost young girl with no money for food. Gloria had given her a hot meal and advice to restart her life. Gloria realized she had saved so many lives she didn't even know about. Now those people returned to save her. They brought handwritten letters and sincere thanks. They refused to let her face hardship alone for one more second. In less than a month, revenue at the Mountain Soul Diner increased 10 times. The tables were always full. Laughter and the sounds of life filled the space that once seemed destined to be sealed forever. With the dedicated help of the Iron Brotherhood brothers and donations from strangers across the country, the diner was renovated. The front parking lot was leveled and expanded. It was big enough to hold dozens of heavy trucks and lines of motorcycles. Gloria stood by the window, looking out at the spacious yard. She smiled when she saw a new small building in the corner. It was a rest area for long-haul drivers. It had clean beds and hot showers for those who needed a temporary sleep before continuing their journey across the state. The kitchen was also equipped with modern appliances. She no longer had to struggle with the broken oven like before. But looking around this cozy space, what made Gloria's heart tremble most was not the freshly painted walls or the shiny equipment. It was the people here. Every day, dozens of guests stopped by. They brought stories and dust from every road. There were tired truck drivers, families traveling with noisy children, and solitary travelers just looking for a peaceful corner. Gloria no longer had to manage alone. Sarah drove up from town often to help on busy weekends. Danny, the young man who was once a lost child, now brought children from the Knoxville orphanage here once a month. He understood that these children, just like him in the past, needed more than a meal. They needed someone to truly see them, to acknowledge their existence. One spring morning, the air still held the chill of mountain mist. Gloria was busy pouring coffee for customers when a luxury black car slowly pulled into the parking lot. It was a shiny black BMW. It looked out of place among the dusty trucks and rugged motorcycles. Gloria's heart skipped a beat when she recognized the car. The door opened and Richard Caldwell stepped out. He stood there for a moment looking around the crowded and lively diner. The members of the Iron Brotherhood sitting at the long outdoor table stopped laughing. Their eyes became alert. Marcus started to stand up, but Gloria raised a hand to signal him to sit down. She took a deep breath. She wiped her hands on her apron and waited behind the bar. Richard walked into the diner. His footsteps no longer had the arrogant echo of the first time. His shoulders were slightly slumped. His face seemed much older than it had 6 months ago. He looked at the painting of Robert on the wall. He looked at the happy customers. Finally, he stopped at Gloria's eyes. "Mrs. Thompson," Richard spoke up. His voice was low and hoarse. It completely lacked the sharp, imposing tone of a powerful bank manager. "I came here to say I am sorry." Gloria did not answer immediately. She looked deep into the eyes of the man who had wanted to take away everything she loved most. The diner suddenly became strangely quiet. The only sounds were the sizzling of meat on the grill and the wind blowing through the pine trees outside. "I was wrong," Richard continued, his voice trembling a little. "What I said to you that day about the value of this place, I really had no right. I looked at you, I looked at this diner, and I only saw a number, a past due debt. I did not see a human being." He paused, swallowing hard. His eyes were full of regret as he looked at Gloria's calloused hands. "My daughter read the article about you," Richard said in a somber voice. She looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Dad, why did you do such things to a good person like her?" At that moment, I realized I had no satisfactory answer. I was too busy with financial reports. I forgot that this world runs on compassion, not just money. Richard paused, staring at his hands. "You want to know the truth, Mrs. Thompson? I lost my job 3 months ago." Gloria looked at him surprised. The bank had a scandal. Fraudulent foreclosures. Turns out my boss was forcing us to meet quotas by targeting vulnerable people. People like you. He laughed bitterly. When the investigation started, they needed a scapegoat. Guess who they chose? "You," Gloria said softly. "Me." Richard nodded. 30 years of loyalty. 60-hour weeks. Missing my daughter's birthdays, her graduations, her wedding. And they threw me away like garbage. He rubbed his temples, his eyes distant. Suddenly, I understood what it felt like, to be powerless, to be dismissed, to have everything you worked for taken away by people who don't see you as human. I spent 2 months feeling sorry for myself, drinking too much, fighting with my wife, pushing everyone away. "What changed?" Gloria asked. "My daughter." Richard's voice cracked. "She sat me down one night, showed me your article on her phone, made me read every word." He wiped his eyes. "When I finished, she asked me a question I couldn't answer. She said, 'Dad, this woman had nothing. She was about to lose everything, and she still chose to help strangers. What's your excuse?'" Richard looked around the busy diner. I realized I had spent my whole life climbing a ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall. I was so focused on success that I forgot what actually matters. "I came here today because I needed to see it with my own eyes, the community you've built, the lives you've touched. I needed to see what real success looks like." Gloria studied him for a long moment. "What will you do now?" Richard smiled, a genuine smile perhaps for the first time in years. "My daughter runs a nonprofit that helps families facing foreclosure. She's been asking me to help for years. I always said I was too busy." He paused. "I'm not too busy anymore." Gloria silently took a white porcelain cup. She poured it full of hot coffee and placed it on the table in front of Richard. "Sit down," Gloria said gently but firmly. "The coffee here is very good. You need a little warmth before you drive back." Richard looked at the cup of coffee, then at her. His eyes suddenly glistened with tears. Do you really forgive me?" Gloria smiled. It was a gentle and forgiving smile like the mountain outside. "Mr. Caldwell, my husband Robert, used to tell me something I always remember. Hate is like drinking poison yourself and waiting for the other person to die. I don't have time to keep that poison in my body. I have too much work to do. I have too many people to serve." Richard sat down. His trembling hands held the coffee cup. He took a sip, and the warmth seemed to soothe some of the torment in his soul. That day, a man who once thought money was everything found a lesson about human value in a roadside diner. 1 year later, Gloria stood before the mirror in the small room behind the diner. She wore an elegant blue shirt. Robert always said it brought out the color of her eyes. Today was a special day. The governor of Tennessee had sent a letter personally inviting Gloria to Nashville. She was to attend the ceremony honoring the outstanding citizens of the state. She was one of 10 people chosen that year. They didn't choose her because she was a billionaire or a brilliant politician. They chose her because her story of resilience and kindness had lit a beacon of hope for thousands of people across the state. The ceremony was held simply but solemnly at the State Administration Building. When Gloria walked into the hall, she did not walk alone. Standing beside her were Marcus, Sarah, and Raymond. Behind them was a long line of Iron Brotherhood members. They had driven hundreds of miles. The sound of motorcycle engines echoed through the streets of Nashville just to come here and support the woman they considered the soul of the road. When the name Gloria Thompson was called, the whole hall stood up and applauded. Gloria walked up to the podium to receive the certificate from the governor. She looked down at the familiar faces in the audience. She took a deep breath to keep her voice from shaking. She didn't need a prepared speech. She just spoke what was overflowing in her heart. "I didn't do anything special," Gloria began. Her voice rang clearly in the quiet hall. "I just did what my heart told me to do. I opened the door when someone knocked. I made a hot cup of coffee when I saw someone shivering from the cold. And I simply listened when someone needed to speak their heart." She paused for a moment, lightly touching the wedding ring on her ring finger. "My husband Robert taught me all those things. He always said that sometimes people come to a diner not because they are hungry for food. They come because they need to be seen. They need to know that they still exist, and there are still people who care about them. That is all I try to do at Mountain Soul Diner. Our diner doesn't just sell food. We sell kindness." Gloria looked up at the high ceiling of the hall, but in her mind she was seeing the starry sky over the Tennessee mountains. She smiled, a smile of complete fulfillment and peace. She realized that although Robert had left this world physically, he had never truly gone. He left her a huge legacy, not money or land, but love and a way of living for others. Those things became the strength that helped her get through the darkest days and build a lighthouse for lost travelers. "Do you see Robert?" she whispered in her mind, feeling a familiar warmth as if he were standing right next to her. We kept the light on, and it will shine forever. The story of Gloria and Robert became a gentle reminder echoing far beyond the Tennessee mountains. It reminds us that kindness doesn't need to be big or loud. Sometimes it is just a hot cup of coffee on a cold night, a listening ear when someone needs to talk, an open door when the world has closed all other doors. And perhaps that is the most beautiful truth. You don't need to be wealthy to be generous. You don't need power to make a difference. You just need to see the people that others ignore. Treat strangers the way you would want to be treated if you were lost, hungry, and lonely on a dark road. Gloria never expected anything in return. She simply did what felt right, night after night, year after year. And 35 years later, those small acts of kindness came back to her in ways she never imagined. So, let me ask you this, my friend. Has a stranger ever shown you kindness when you needed it most? A moment that stayed with you even after all these years? Or perhaps you once helped someone and wondered if it made any difference? I would love to hear your story. Please share it in the comments below, because every story of kindness deserves to be told. And who knows, maybe your words will inspire someone to open their door tonight. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video. It costs nothing, but it helps us share these stories with more people who need to hear them. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things through simple acts of love, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. We are building a community of people who still believe in the goodness of humanity, and we would be honored to have you with us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to the end. And thank you for believing that kindness still matters in this world.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.